Hey folks, BlackCross here, and happy Halloween everybody. Hopefully this is Halloween. Hopefully I've released this on October 31st. But if I hadn't, happy belated October 31st. Happy Halloween regardless, either way. Because today's special video, I'm going to review two video games. Two of them specifically themed for Halloween. It was potentially going to be one, but I decided to do two because the first one was a little bit scary. Which, I know some people will probably look at it and be like, was it really that scary? And it's like, compared to some video games, probably not. But for me, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But with that being said, the first game I want to talk about is Bendy and the Ink Machine. Yes, I finally got around to playing this one. And here's the thing, while horror survivor games aren't really my genre of expertise, what I do love is the 1920s, 1930s theming behind it, you know? Think about it, we had Cuphead, and it was themed around the 1920s, 1930s cartoon animation style that it was based on. And let me just say, while the game is hard, it looks beautiful. And the TV show that Netflix helped create, by help I mean allowed to air on a streaming service, absolutely looks amazing. I love every bit of it, and Bendy and the Ink Machine is practically within that same category, and I wanted to play it because it looked cool. Also too, it was cheap at a retro game store, and I was like, you know what, let's just go ahead and get it, you know. I'm interested enough to want to get it, it's cheap enough to pick it up, why not, right? So, I went ahead and play it. And I knew right off the bat that this was kind of a horror survivor game. And I didn't realize how creepy it would get until I was playing through the first chapter. Like, I kind of had an idea, but I had no idea. I had no idea what to expect beyond just, like, exploring this warehouse and stuff. So, literally within the first chapter, barely anything technically happens at all. Except for whenever you turn on the machine. When you finally turn on the ink machine. And you decide to go back to where the machine is at. Number one, the entire warehouse goes dark. That's automatically a first red flag. The second red flag, all the doors are shut, and including to the one door shut that leads downstairs to what I assume might be a break room or something like that. I may be completely wrong. But, you go, the door is closed, but there are foot tracks leading into it. And it's like, that door was not shut. And there are footsteps. Okay, red flag number two. I am walking away from where the footsteps are going into where the machine is supposed to be. And the foot tracks end where the pipe was, where it says watch your step. And it's like, okay. Either way, so you get ready to go towards the machine, but obviously it's blockaded due to the wood, wood that fell from the ceilings and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, a creature pulls you in, and you were able to bounce off of it. And immediately, the first words you see after that happen, run. So let me see if I get this straight. We have this premise of where I'm in a warehouse, looking through an old friend's, or probably even old old partner, stuff and everything like that. And I turn on this weird machine, and I go back to the machine, and the first thing I'm greeted is this weird, demonic looking entity, and the first thing that I see after that is run. Home button, turn off PS4. I literally did that. As soon as that happened, I was like, nope. I mean, keep in mind, this is October, the month of horror, so obviously the scale has been increased a little bit. But that just increased even more so in the worst possible way. So I literally powered off the system because I was like, nope. I didn't even catch a full glimpse of what the creature looked like, but I was just so terrifying. Turns out that creature is known as the Ink Demon, or as it is technically specified within the story, as I have discovered, is that is supposed to be Bendy. Yeah, that thing's supposed to be Bendy. Yeah, this cute little guy. See this cute little guy? Look like that! On the one hand, you know, the entire warehouse is literally this basic color of brown and black. It's supposed to have this reminiscent feel of this retro cartoony 1930s style. And it works really well, actually. It really does. It really stands out in terms of characteristics of how the background looks and stuff like that. But in terms of horror, it kind of nails it to some extent. You know, there's some creatures that are morphed, creepily weird. Some of them are broken up in some ways. And while some of them are okay, some of them are a little bit terrifying to a certain degree, especially depending on how you go about doing certain things. There's actually one creature that scares me the most, and I have to say, it doesn't help of what it is, okay? It does not help how it comes to find you. So, it starts off in Chapter 3, technically, but it also carries on into Chapter 4. Basically, what happens is that this creature will randomly pop up. And the way that you know that it does show up is whenever the wall starts to turn black. Like, random black goop starts seeping through the walls and stuff like that. And immediately you think to yourself, okay, what the heck's going on? And then you turn around. It's like, I turn around. And there it is! Seriously, this thing is covered in ink from head to toe. The only thing that isn't covered in ink is this one white glove and half of his face. The bottom half. And you see that smile. And here's the thing. If you get a closer look at it, which I would not recommend anyone doing that, the mouth is kind of jittery. It doesn't help that there's been this one movie that recently came out. YouTube has been advertising the living shit out of it, called Smile. If you don't know, don't look it up. I promise you, you will have nightmares later on. I know it's taunted me for the past month. But anyway, that smile is the same fucking smile. It's the same freaking one. It is so haphazardly terrifying. It's that demonic smile. It's just, oh gosh, just thinking about it just makes me creep out. Doesn't help that if the background is completely black, all you see is the bottom half of his face and that glove. It's terrifying. However though, while atmosphere it does great, and certain enemies it does really well, gameplay wise, I'm afraid is very much lackluster, I'm afraid. I mean, obviously this is an indie game, so I can't complain it too much. It functions just fine, but in terms of how it technically works, it's not exactly well done in my personal opinion. Like, for example, the run animation is very slow, I'm afraid. It doesn't feel like you're running. It feels like you're doing a light jog at best, but it's not really a run animation, I'm afraid. And then, of course, you have the fact that you have the attack animation is more of a tap, tap, rather than a tap, 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 you know, because you're panicking and stuff like that, and instead you're like, bing, 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 and it's one of those things where I'm just like, gameplay could have been a little bit better, I felt like, you know, it's one of those things, but overall, it's not a long game, really. If you want an interesting horror survivor game to go with the theme of your month of Halloween, like how most gamers usually are, I'm one of them, crazily enough as it is, but I'm not the only one who usually goes into this type of stuff, you know? If there's a horror themed game that piques your interest, I would say Bendy and the Ink Machine would be that interesting one. But I'm not going to give it a high rating, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5, and I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 for two main reasons. Reason number one actually involves the gameplay. Like I said, it's a little bit sluggish, unfortunately. Could be better, and if it can be better, that would be great. But it's not really that great. Secondly, it's not really a long game, which really, horror survivor games shouldn't really last that long. But depending on the person, they could probably beat it in one nice sitting. Like literally, the longest it probably would take people would probably be at most 6 hours at best, if they sit with it and stuff. The puzzles are very somewhat challenging, not too challenging. It's more of just finding it and figuring out where stuff is at. Fairly straightforward to get yourself around. The areas aren't big at all. It's again, fairly short. And most people could probably beat it in under 6 hours. But for the most part, I would definitely give it a 3 out of 5. Now, I'm going to show you the game, but I'm afraid I can't say that I have done the whole thing. I've only done half of it technically, and that is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which this is technically Castlevania Requiem, which features both Radon, I'm butchering that name already as it is, but Radon of Blood, or in this case, Symphony of the Night. And I decided to play through Symphony of the Night because Bendy and the Ink Machine scared the living shit out of me almost. But I played through Castlevania Symphony of the Night because, you know, to stay within the theme of Month of Horror, as well as one of the very few Castlevania games that I've been interested in. Now, here's the thing. I've been what you would call a stalker of the Castlevania franchise. I've been interested in the series. I've been wanting to go into them and stuff like that. I've just never really made any strong headway into them. Like, I've played through the first one so many times, trying to beat through it, you know? Like, I tried to progress far enough into Castlevania 1. The only problem is, the farthest I've ever gotten was this Frankenstein character and his little hopping minion called the Flea Man, which I can't believe they called it that, but that's what it's officially called. It's called the Flea Man. But it's like a Frankenstein and Flea Man combo, and I always die to it. It's never easy. It's one of those bosses that I just have the most trouble out of and stuff like that. If I could figure out how to beat it, I don't think I would have any trouble, but the problem is that it's hard for me to beat it even with the re-releases for the current consoles, where it has like the quick save options or the save lock options and stuff like that. Even with that, it's still pretty freaking hard. So I decided that, okay, well, if that's not going to be the first Castlevania game that I can beat, let it at least be Symphony of the Night, because I've heard so many people talk about Symphony of the Night for years, and I've wanted to finally hop into it. I mean, Symphony of the Night is literally the Castlevania game that everyone thinks back to. You know, you have the original Castlevania game, which is iconic for a lot of people. But you get what I'm saying, it's literally the most popular Castlevania game, and it's literally what created the majority of the Castlevania games to a certain point, you know, where it became more of an RPG style, where you have level up, stats, different weapons to use and stuff like that. It still carries the same ideology as Castlevania back in its early days and stuff, but Symphony of the Night evolutionized it, you know, back in the PlayStation 1, of course. And I wanted to play it, and I finally did. And there were a couple of things that I had issues with. Issue number one was that it was very tight on platforming. Like, I won't deny whenever I say this, I'm not fairly good when it comes to platformer, but this is like heavy platforming. Like, most of the other Metroidvania games that I've played in the past, like Sultan Sanctuary as well as Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, its platforming isn't really hard. It's one of those things where you can get through it relatively easily fine. However, though, due to its complex platforming and the enemies being so flippin' overpowered to a certain degree, it's very challenging. It's very hard to get through the game and stuff like that. And so it was one of those reasons why I decided to just say, I need to look up a strategy guide on how I'm going to get through this. And I did look up a strategy guide. I found one that basically didn't give too much spoilers, but rather a step-by-step of like, here's where you need to go to get to one thing to another and so on and so forth. It basically helped in that regard. So it was one of those things where it's like, okay, so this kind of points to the direction of where I need to go. Because I was kind of getting a little confused and lost in certain areas. I was like, okay, so have I been here? No, have I been? And I rarely get lost in video games. I rarely get lost in video games. But for some reason, Symphony of the Night, I got very lost. So I'm going to say this right now. If you're playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the very first time, look up a guide. I promise you it will help you out in the long run. It's one of those things where I cannot urge you enough where I say the phrase, you're gonna need it. You're going to need a guide. Because while the castle itself is very complex, there's also different platform elements that you're going to need in order to help you progress through the game a lot easier. Not only that, but there's also multiple endings. Technically, from what I've read, there's like 4 endings, but I've only gotten 2 of them. One of them is, of course, the bad ending, in which where you basically kill Richter Belmont. But then there's a second ending where if you do extra stuff, you can actually help save Richter Belmont from this one guy that tried to control him and stuff like that. And then you have to traverse into the reverse castle, which is basically an upside down version of the castle that you just explored. And it's one of those things where it's like, I honestly have to say I didn't like the reverse castle. It's one of those, I guess what it is that because it is backwards, it makes it complex, you know? I get the ideal, but I kind of hate it due to its backward style. But by this point, you should have all of the basic abilities that you need in order to traverse the reverse castle. But again, because of how it is, I kind of hate it. I hated the reverse castle. But for the most part, the game is actually really good. Once you get into a certain point in the game where your progression is seemingly on par, the game is fun. The game can be enjoyable. But it also can be hard. So depending on how you look at the game, if you just want to go straight into it, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard and you're probably going to more than likely hate the game. But if you get a guide, like a good guide that is spoiler free, but kind of helps you get through where you need to be at and stuff like that, it can actually be very enjoyable. Like, I enjoyed the game once I got to a point to where, okay, I know where I need to go, I know where I'm going, and I'm actually enjoying myself in terms of fighting the bosses and stuff like that. Really, in all honesty, the bosses are actually really good. And I actually enjoyed it. I really did. This was something that I was hoping that I would find whenever I was playing through the original Castlevania game. But because of how hard that is, it's almost impossible to go into it. But because of how somewhat manageable Castlevania Symphony of the Night can be, it was actually really enjoyable. I will eventually play through Redon of Blood, but until I get to that point, I had played through Symphony of the Night, and so I'm going to go ahead and real quickly give Symphony of the Night a 4 out of 5. So, if you are a Castlevania fan, Metroidvania fan, and you hadn't played through Castlevania Symphony of the Night, definitely give it a shot. It's definitely worth the playthrough, especially since it's helped me get through the nightmares that I've had with Bendy and the Ink Machine. So whenever I say the phrase, I enjoyed the Castlevania Symphony of the Night a little bit better, it's because of the fact that it wasn't as horrifying. You know, it wasn't trying to scare me compared to Bendy and this Ink Demon thing. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I got this made and finished up to where you can watch it on Halloween night for that matter. So if you're watching it on October 31st, then happy Halloween to you. And I shall see you in the next video. Until then, this is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.